Hello comparison test viewers, and welcome back to another All Cars Everyday video. I'm standing here with the 2021 Toyota Venza, which is brand new for this model year after it took a pretty long hiatus from Toyota's lineup. This vehicle here is the 2021 Toyota RAV4. This particular model is the non-hybrid RAV4. And here is the 2021 Toyota RAV4 Hybrid. As you can see from the exterior, the two don't look that dissimilar. I'm comparing these SUVs today in 8 different categories with the goal of assigning an advantage to a particular SUV in each of those 8 categories, if there is one. Furthermore, I'm comparing the SUVs at a specific trim level, which is the XLE Premium version of the RAV4 and RAV4 Hybrid and the XLE version of the Venza. I won't be adding any options or packages to those trim levels to keep the comparison test as fair as possible. With that out of the way, let's get into our first area of evaluation, which is going to be the value proposition. Before we get into the comparison, I want to thank Toyota of Iowa City for letting me film with the new Venza and a RAV4 and RAV4 Hybrid. Located at 1445 Iowa 1 in Iowa City, this dealer has a sprawling showroom with a friendly sales staff at the ready and a beautiful lounge area and service bay. Visit toyotaiowacity.com or give them a call to learn more. In this category, we take a look at the MSRP of each vehicle and then look at the standard features offered for that price. The brand new Venza XLE starts at an MSRP of $36,000 flat. For that chunk of change, the exterior has 19-inch super chrome alloy wheels, a dual chrome tipped exhaust, and low-profile silver roof rails up top. The side view mirrors are heated and power folding, and they have puddle lights mounted on the bottom to light up the ground as you unlock the vehicle. All exterior lighting on the Venza XLE is LED, including the projector beam headlights, dual LED daytime running lights, and tail lamps. At the rear of the vehicle is a height-adjustable, hands-free power liftgate. Just hold your foot under the rear bumper for a second or two and the liftgate will automatically swing open, as seen in other higher-end vehicles. Finally, the Venza has a keyless access system on all 4 doors and that liftgate that allows entry to or locking of the vehicle via the doorknob instead of being forced to use the fob. On the inside, the driver has an 8-way power-adjustable seat that has power lumbar support and a 2-position memory function that will also adjust the power steering wheel when the seatbelt is fastened. The passenger seat has 4 ways of power adjustment. The seats are trimmed in fabric with soft-tex bolstering, which is a leather-like substitute. Both the front seats are heated, and the rear seats fold in 60/40 sections for different types of cargo and passenger seating configurations. Technology in the Venza is significantly upgraded over the previous generation, with Toyota's Audio Plus infotainment system on an 8-inch touchscreen in the center of the dashboard, plus a 7-inch color LCD display in the gauge cluster behind the steering wheel. That latter screen is reconfigurable with the steering wheel mounted controls to show odometer, trip distance, a clock, the hybrid energy monitor, and more. It sits between an analog speedometer and fuel gauge on the right and an analog temperature gauge and hybrid drive system on the left. The hybrid drive system gauge takes the place of a tachometer, and the needle points to a place on the gauge depending on how you're driving. Under hard acceleration, it will swing clockwise toward the end of the gauge, implying high energy usage. Under lighter acceleration, it will be somewhere in the green or yellow eco portions of the gauge. Under eco is a small area deemed charge, where the needle goes when the car is recapturing energy from the brakes or from the sequential shifting available through the gear selector, but we'll take a more in-depth look at that in driving impressions. The infotainment screen is more standard, with Bluetooth, a 3-month subscription to Sirius XM, and Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and Amazon Alexa capability. These audio playing features go through the Venza's 6-speaker audio system. There are plenty of convenience features on the Venza's interior, including an auto-dimming rearview mirror with a HomeLink universal transceiver, an electronic parking brake with an auto-hold feature, and dual-zone automatic climate control. The Venza also has illuminated door sills and footwells up front, as well as a leather steering wheel and shift boot. There's also push-button starts and express up and down windows at all 4 corners. Places to plug in devices are plentiful, including a wireless charger and 2 USB ports per row, as well as a traditional 12-volt outlet. Finally, the 2 GB Wi-Fi connection can be used by passengers and allows the Venza to be remotely connected to the owner's smart device using the Toyota app. It has Safety and Remote Connect on a 1-year trial and Service Connect on a 10-year trial. Safety Connect allows for vehicle tracking, the emergency assistance button, automatic collision notification, and enhanced roadside assistance. The remote services allow for remote start, lock, and unlock, among other features. Service Connect sends maintenance reminders and a vehicle health report to keep your Venza in tip-top condition. The 2021 RAV4 XLE Premium all-wheel drive has an MSRP of $31,450. The hybrid version of the same vehicle starts only $1,050 more at $32,500. Both RAV4 XLE Premiums have nearly identical features. The main differences are found under the hood and on the exterior. Unless I explicitly outline the difference between the gas and hybrid versions, what I say applies to both. The exterior of the gas version has 19-inch Super Chrome alloy wheels, but the hybrid has 18-inch wheels with a different design. Both have heated side view mirrors, black roof rails, a dual chrome tipped exhaust, and a power-operated liftgate out back. The hybrid has slightly better headlights with projector beam LED units to the multi-LED headlights in the gas version, but there isn't a huge difference in terms of visibility. The rest of the lighting is the same, with LED DRLs, LED tail lamps, and fog lights as well. The front doors are part of the keyless access system that affords entry and exit to the RAV4 without having to use the fob. When it comes to seating, the driver is treated to an 8-way power adjustable driver's seat, including power lumbar support. The passenger gets 4 ways of manual adjustment, and the rear seats fold in 60/40 sections. All seating surfaces are trimmed in Softex synthetic leather. Despite not being the real deal, it's pretty impressive regardless. Speaking of the real deal, the steering wheel and shift knob are trimmed in real leather. In the middle of the dashboard sits Toyota's 7-inch color touchscreen infotainment system that's the host for Bluetooth, Sirius XM, and Apple CarPlay, as well as Android Auto. All of that audio playing capability runs through the SUV's 6-speaker audio system. There's another screen behind the steering wheel in the gauge cluster that's the 4.2-inch driver information center. In this vehicle, it has a customizable clock, outside temperature reading, fuel economy information, and more. To the left of that screen is an analog tachometer with the engine temperature gauge below it. In the hybrid, the tachometer is replaced with the same hybrid system gauge we saw in the Venza, with the same charge, eco, and power consumption gauges. To the right of the screen is an analog speedometer with the fuel gauge. Convenience features on the Toyota include dual-zone automatic climate control, push-button start, express windows at all 4 corners, and an electronic parking brake with auto hold. Finally, there's a power tilt and sliding moonroof, as well as plenty of places to plug in your phone, including 5 USB ports, one of which is a data USB port, as well as 2 charge-only USB ports per row. There are also 2 traditional 12-volt outlets in the cabin, and a Wi-Fi connection for passengers that can also be used on the Toyota Connected Services app. Standard, owners get Safety Connect with stolen vehicle locator, collision notification to the Toyota Response Center, roadside assistance, and an SOS button, free for a year. In this category, the gas RAV4 gets the advantage. Besides the powertrain, the only differences between the two RAV4s that contribute to the value factor are the bigger wheels in the non-hybrid, which are at least partially offset by the better headlights in the hybrid. It's safe to say the $1,050 price hike is due nearly completely to the powertrain. But I don't factor powertrain into the value proposition, I factor it into the powertrain category. In my comparisons, value means features for your dollar, which points directly at the gas RAV4. The Venza starts $4,550 more than the gas RAV4 and $3,500 more than the hybrid RAV4, which is a more accurate representation of the Venza's price premium. Standard, it has the power folding mirrors and steering column, the bigger gauge cluster screen, a 1-inch bigger infotainment screen, and the hands-free part of the power liftgate. Admittedly, I don't think those features are worth the $3,500 premium over the hybrid or the $4,550 over the gas one. But part of that expense is the fact that the Venza is designed from the start to be a more premium model based on styling, road presence, and status. That being said, we take a look at the styling differences in the styling category. But for the value segment, the gas RAV4 presents the most features for your money. Now, you also need to take into account if the gas RAV4 will cost more in fuel over the course of its ownership versus the hybrid RAV4, which we'll look at in the fuel economy category. In this category, we take a look at the standard active safety technology of each vehicle, as well as reviewing the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's passive crash test results. The Venza has Toyota Safety Sense 2.0, which includes the following active safety features: a pre-collision system with pedestrian detection, lane departure alert with steering assist, lane tracing assist, automatic high beams, full speed dynamic radar cruise control, and road sign assist. The Venza XLE also has a blind spot monitor with front and rear parking assist and automatic braking. It was rated a 2020 top safety pick by the IIHS and got the best score of good everywhere except the headlights, which ranged from a rating of marginal to acceptable. The 2021 RAV4s mirror those features, save for the full-speed dynamic radar cruise control and the front and rear parking assist with automatic braking. The RAV4 as a model was rated the second highest rank from the IIHS as a 2020 top safety pick, like the Venza. It received the highest rating of good in every category but headlights, which had a range from poor to good. For safety, the Venza takes the cake as it has the parking assistance features and the full-speed dynamic radar cruise control on the RAV4s, and they tied for very high rankings in safety. In this category, we take a look at the engine, transmission, 0 to 60 time, and other performance features that are relevant to each vehicle. The brand new Venza and the RAV4 Hybrid come with Toyota's newer 2.5-liter dynamic force inline 4-cylinder that has spread across the Toyota lineup like wildfire. In both vehicles, it makes 219 horsepower. It is supplemented by a lithium-ion battery and 2 electric motors, a bigger one for the front wheels and a smaller one on the rear axle for a maximum 650-volt rating. Combined torque is unrated, but it shouldn't fall too far from the horsepower rating. The power is sent through Toyota's electronically controlled continuously variable transmission, or eCVT. It is not like a traditional automatic in that it does not have real gears and instead uses infinitely swappable ratios. But it's not like a traditional CVT either, as it's not belt-driven. Instead, the planetary gear set is controlled by an electric motor, accomplishing much the same purpose as the belts. All 2021 Venzas and RAV4 hybrids come standard with electronic on-demand all-wheel drive and have sport, eco, normal, and pure EV modes available to the driver depending on the situation. As far as I can tell, the RAV4 hybrid also has a trail mode, probably a substitute for the more distinct modes in the gas version. All of this is good for a 7.5 second 0 to 60 run in the Venza and a 7.1 second run in the RAV4 hybrid, due either to different testing conditions or the RAV4 hybrid's smaller weight. The gas version of the RAV4 is powered by the same engine seen in the hybrids. In the gas car, it's rated at 203 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 takes 8.2 seconds, which is notably slower than the hybrids. In this category, I think the Venza and RAV4 hybrid tie for the advantage. They are more powerful, and as a result of that and the way their all-wheel drive system is set up relative to the gas RAV4, quicker. They have more modern powertrains as a whole. I do like the 8-speed in the gas car better than the eCVT, but we'll look more at subjective powertrain feel and driving impressions. In this category, we take a look at how efficient those powertrains are by looking at their miles per gallon, their average fuel range, and their yearly fuel cost. The new Venza and RAV4 hybrid are rated at a huge 41 in the city and 38 on the highway, for 40 mpg combined. The gas RAV4 is rated at a still very good for the segment 27 in the city and 33 on the highway for 29 combined mpg. Longest range belongs to the RAV4 hybrid with a 580-mile cruising range to the Venza's 566 miles and the gas RAV4's 421-mile range with the same size tank as the hybrid. When it comes to fuel cost, the RAV4 hybrid is the cheapest to fuel in a year by a slim margin to the Venza, with just $833 a year in fuel to the Venza's $854. Using the same calculations for the gas RAV4, which are 15,000 miles driven annually and a gas price of $2.22 a gallon, the normal RAV4 costs $1,107 a year to fuel. Clearly the Venza and RAV4 hybrid are very similar in this category, so let's see how long it would take to amortize the cost of each hybrid over the RAV4 gas model. If you remember, the gas RAV4 is $1,050 less than the hybrid. So again, assuming you drive 15,000 miles in a year and gas stays at $2.22 a gallon, it would take 3.8 years for it to make more financial sense to buy the hybrid, which by the standard I was seeing a couple years ago is a very reasonable amount of time, especially if you tend to keep your cars a long time. If you're comparing the Venza to the gas RAV4, it would take nearly 18 years to start seeing a financial gain, which is probably not worth it. Now, one thing to remember is you have to take your own mileage into account as well as gas price fluctuation. If you would like to do your own calculations, I will put a link at the bottom of the screen where you can customize the calculation for yourself. Simply pick the vehicle you want to compare and click Personalize Fuel Prices and Drive Habits. Click Recalculate, and boom, you have your personal difference between the three. Now, to see what each car will cost with your driving habits, divide 1,050 by the difference between the RAV4 hybrid's cost per year and the gas RAV4's cost per year. That number is the amount of years it would take to break even. If you want to see the difference between the gas RAV4 and the Venza, divide 4,550 by the difference between their yearly fuel costs. Since this is a comparison of hybrids and the gas and hybrid RAV4 are so close in terms of saving money, I want to give everyone the means to get an accurate rating for themselves. In this category, it's a blowout with the Venza and RAV4 Hybrid coming out on top, as is to be expected from comparing two hybrid cars to a gas car. I would like to point out that the gas RAV4 is extremely competitive versus other gas offerings, but anything from this class is going to pale in comparison to Toyota's hybrid systems. The RAV4 Hybrid probably makes the most financial sense for most Americans of the three, but to exclude the Venza from the advantage would be taking its MSRP into account twice, when we already noted that the gas RAV4 won the value competition. At this point, you should be able to distinguish whether you are buying more for status or for functionality or fiscal matters, as this is the main difference between the RAV4 Hybrid and the Venza. In this category, I take a look at the projected reliability of each vehicle as predicted by Consumer Reports. They extensively test every new vehicle for sale and use historical data to try and accurately forecast new car reliability. They rate each vehicle on a scale from much worse than average to much better than average. The Venza's reliability is unrated so far as the model is too new. Don't expect it to stray too far from the RAV4 model line's rating of average, though I suppose it could achieve a better rating if the hybrid powertrain turns out to be more reliable than the gas one in the RAV4. Though it's rated average, the RAV4 scores a near perfect score in every line item except in-car electronics, which is potentially what relegated it to average. I would not be worried about any of these three being unreliable, though. In this category, all three are most likely equal. Not much to report here. Functionality is where I wrap up the loose ends of the comparison and include important buying factors that are relevant to purchasing these vehicles, but don't fit into other categories, such as interior dimensions, warranty, and cargo capacity. All three vehicles have the industry standard warranty, which is a 3-year, 36,000-mile general warranty and a 5-year, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty. The two hybrids also have an 8-year, 100,000-mile hybrid system warranty and a 10-year, 150,000-mile battery warranty. The gas RAV4 can tow 1,500 pounds to the hybrid RAV4's 1,750, and the Venza is unrated, but I expect it to fall in between the two RAV4s. Interior space-wise, the RAV4s are identical. The battery and electric motors do not affect interior space at all. Both RAV4s have more head and hip room in the rear seat. When it comes to hip room, up to 2.5 inches more than the Venza. Shoulder room is a ½ inch bigger in the rear of the Venza, but leg room is identical at 37.8 inches in all three models. The real difference in terms of interior space is that the RAV4 has 37.5 cubic feet of space behind the rear seats to the Venza's 28.8, which is a very significant difference. When the rear seats are folded down, the RAV4 expands to 69.8 cubic feet and the Venza gets to 55.1. Again, a huge difference. Blame it on the Venza's sportier, more seductive packaging versus the RAV4's function over form. But if you haul a lot of stuff, it's pretty hard to argue the Venza over the RAV4. In this category, both RAV4 models take the advantage. The RAV4 Hybrid can tow 250 pounds more than the gas version, but because people shouldn't be buying these vehicles to tow often, that's not enough to strip the normal RAV4 of its shared advantage. In this category, I drive each of the vehicles on real roads and rate my subjective opinions on driving style. Typically, my commentary includes noise, vibration, and harshness levels, steering feel and weight, suspension bump absorption, acceleration, brake feel, ergonomics of the cabin, and general handling. I am not testing these vehicles at a track, nor am I pushing them to their absolute limits. Furthermore, like I mentioned, this is a subjective category, so I recommend making sure you test drive each vehicle yourself to confirm or deny your own opinions on the vehicle experience. Alright, so here we are, guys, in the 2021 Toyota Venza XLE. Okay, so the memory system goes in when the seatbelt is plugged in. So there's the engine starting. I started it. It started obviously in EV mode. Why are all the windshield wipers on? How do I get? All right, I think my windshield wipers are off. Okay, I thought wrong. The windshield wipers are not off. Boy, this thing is smooth. This thing is smooth, man. So one thing I'll say about this and other Toyota hybrid models, I've noticed that the engine isn't obtrusive when it starts, but you sure notice it's there. Like, I know the engine's running right now. And I haven't driven enough hybrid vehicles to know whether, you know, this is more a specific thing to Toyota or not. So let's start with visibility. Versus the RAV4, the visibility is less. Less at the side, less at the front. I would call it average, maybe a few ticks below average. Out the back is below average. Sort of like the Mazda CX-5 that I reviewed a couple weeks ago. Out the back is pretty minimal, at least in terms of height. This thing feels significantly faster than the RAV4 Hybrid or the RAV4, as far as I can tell. Maybe I'm confused, because the RAV4, as far as I can tell, shares the same powertrain. Or maybe it's that I put it in sport. I don't know if they ever drove the RAV4 Hybrid in sport mode. Off a dig. This is in sport mode. It's very quick to jump into the power range on that tachometer that I'm looking at. So of course, when you're coasting, it goes down into the charge portion of the tach, which is, ideally where you want it to be, which means that the car is regenerating some energy from the coasting. All right, let's go over some bumpy road here. It's very bumpy, so we're not going to go fast. Handling it pretty well. And again, the oscillations you're seeing in this shot here are due to the fact that this is, essentially the bumpiest road that I can possibly get to. All right, so you just missed probably 10 minutes of commentary. I don't know when my camera turned off. I was just saying the merits of the suspension are very nice. It does a good job isolating you from the road no matter what, so far from what I can understand. I was also mentioning the brake pedal felt normal compared to a gas car brake pedal, until I did a little bit of a panic stop again. So there are two 392 Chargers, and they are going crazy. Fortunately, they're way away from me now, so they can't power slide into my car. That was another thing, when the camera turned off. There were two Chargers doing power slides behind me. I don't appreciate that necessarily because I'm in a brand new untitled 2021 Venza. Do not power slide into me. That would make me very upset. Back to what I was saying. As soon as you get into it a little more, the brake pedal slows the car down totally fine, totally appropriately. It does what you want it to do, but it kind of feels a little bad. And by feels bad, I mean it's a little spongy. It's non-linear, so it doesn't really inspire confidence that maybe like the gas brake pedal would, or even the confidence that it normally inspires when you're not, stopping harder than normal. That's pretty much the extent of my commentary while the camera was off. The seats are good. The seats are almost perfect, I would say. Okay, so I'm 5'10", like 175. And the sides of my body are just starting to touch the bolstering here. I was pointing out earlier that I do like the way that the transmission just sits at a gear instead of trying to replicate a fake shift, unless you have it in the sport mode, which I'll show you here on the downshift. So there's third, second. Basically, when you accelerate, you can just hear it and it just will stick. Especially if you're at full throttle, it'll just stick at the maximum RPM, most efficient RPM, and it's not gonna simulate a gear change like I've seen in Subarus and Nissans. And CVTs often get flack for not doing this. I personally like it better if the CVT just stops pretending it's a traditional automatic and just doesn't shift and holds the gear like the original CVTs were intended to. That seems to be Toyota's strategy. I kind of like that better. That's personal preference. Some people hate the fact that CVTs just sit there and drone. I prefer that the CVT doesn't fake like it's an automatic. And even if you do prefer that you fake it's an automatic, pop this thing in sport and you can sit there and downshift all you want and get all that regen. In this application, the car will upshift and downshift. It'll really downshift. I mean, the car will slow down based on the battery and based on the engine as well. It will engine brake with the battery, recoup some of the energy, but during upshifts it'll do this little like fake upshift, so it's not as strong as the like Forester Limited. When I tested that, it really faked the shift, and like I said, that was weird to me. I didn't love that. So right now we're motoring around just in EV mode, so we're using no gas. The gas engine is shut off. You can hear that it's shut off. One thing I want to point out for Toyota hybrids, not so much the Venza as much as the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, was that when you're puttering around in EV mode, it almost sounds like there are police sirens behind you, to me at least, especially when you're at this low speed. So when you're at low speed, I believe the car emits this little hum so that deaf people can know that there's a hybrid vehicle around and it's operating in EV mode because they can't hear a combustion engine. And so to me, that sounds a little bit like police sirens. Initially, it freaked me out when I was driving the RAV4 hybrid, but I think within 3 days of owning and operating one of these cars, you'll get used to it. Okay, that's not police sirens. It was just an interesting tidbit from me that I thought was interesting. So we are going to, it's good turning radius, very good turning radius. The steering might be a little overboosted, to be honest with you. I think I like the RAV4 gas-powered steering better. Now, the steering is pretty direct. It's a quick rack because you can turn far with one turn. It might be a variable ratio rack because you're turning more with more degrees of angle. So I believe it's variable ratio. I'll check that out once I'm done driving it. It does seem like it's a variable ratio steering wheel, steering rack, I should say.
And basically what that means is the more you turn the wheel, the more the car turns. People love it, people hate it. I don't know. I think it's personally fine. It's especially good for highway cruising because you don't get a lot of the jitters that you would with a linear quick rack. But otherwise, this one's pretty quick. Directness is challenged by the fact that the vehicle has what seems to me a variable ratio steering rack. So I wouldn't say it's the most direct steering ever, and it might be a tad over boosted, but it's accurate. It's accurate steering, and it doesn't falsely try and weight up really weird when you're turning it. It doesn't weight up in a strange way like some cars want you to feel like, okay, you're really turning in sport time, It doesn't do that. It pretty much just stays the same weight. And again, that could be personal preference. I like it the way it is, honestly. I think it could use to have about 25, 30% more weight to it. And there's almost no feel out of the wheel, but those aren't things that Venza owners are going to care about at all.
One final thing I forgot to mention during my drive of the Venza is the haptic touch surface for the climate and some audio controls. It looks sleek and in theory may work as intended, but I missed a normal volume knob. The knob is replaced by up and down volume areas, which are easy to miss and required me to take my eyes off the road just to adjust the volume. Even then, the system only seemed to register about 2/3 of the clicks I wanted it to. It's the same story for much of the climate controls. I just found it more annoying with the volume, which I adjust more frequently.
Here we are in the 2021 Toyota RAV4 XLE Premium. The vehicle that I'm actually driving today is the hybrid model, so of course it starts in EV mode. So obviously it's a very quiet operation here. Now, this is going to drive slightly differently than the regular model. Obviously it's got EV operation. It's probably a little heavier due to the battery and electric motor, and it's got slightly different power ratings. But once I straighten it out here, we're going to give it a little bit of gas as is usual and see how it performs. Very quick off the line. Let's see the brakes here. Brakes are maybe a tad soft, and it's got some regen braking going on. That could be why the brake pedals are a little soft. The travel is linear, and it brings the car down to speed exactly as I want them to. The feel is just not as ideal as I would normally want it. Here I am in the brand new 2021 Toyota RAV4 XLE. This particular model is not the Premium, but don't worry, all the interior and exterior footage was of an XLE Premium Hybrid. But for the driving impressions part of this comparison, since I'm comparing a theoretical XLE Premium, just gas-powered RAV4 without the hybrid portion, I thought that I would drive both vehicles to make sure that I get an accurate representation of what the engine, transmission, and NVH sound like, noise, vibration, harshness. Because as you know, the hybrid is lacking a lot of NVH, especially since it can operate in EV mode. Right off the bat, I do like the brake of the regular RAV4 better than the hybrid. The hybrid brakes were totally fine in terms of safety and actually stopping the vehicle. They felt a little soft to me though, and there was a lot of travel. I felt like compared to what I expect out of a normal brake pedal and out of, believe it or not, a Toyota brake pedal. And so what I'm feeling right now in the RAV4 just gas version is much more appropriate. It's a good brake pedal. It's not quite as good as maybe the Mazda's, I would say, but it's very good nonetheless. It's pretty good AC. Let's see the turning radius. Good. Better, obviously better than my current car, as you guys have been hearing. Next up, let's talk about visibility. Visibility in the RAV4 is very good. The windows are taller, the A-pillars are much thinner, but the side view is very good, and the rear view is pretty good as well. Okay, noise, vibration, harshness. Really not that much worse than the hybrid. I was expecting there to be a big difference, but because the hybrid can operate in EV mode a lot of the time, but really there's not that much of a difference. The seats are awesome. So right now I'm testing the lane keeping system. So it knows I'm not grabbing onto the steering wheel. It does ping pong back and forth in the lane. It kept me in it. It ping pongs back and forth. And again, that's not a system that's designed to, drive the car. It's more if I start, going over the line, it alerts me and it puts me back in my lane. Here's a very bumpy road. Let's see how it handles it. Good. I mean, that was pretty good. Again, I'm going slow over things. So this is extremely rough pavement. Extremely, extremely rough pavement. And I think it's handling it pretty well. It's handling this pavement pretty well. Here, let's go over it again. Here's some pretty big bumps right here. Yeah, that's very good. Pedal to the metal, much louder than the hybrid. Awesome transmission. Boy, this thing's fun. Transmission is not afraid to hold a gear. Kudos. I like this 8-speed. It's not grabbing for the highest possible gear in the interest of fuel economy. The RAV4 gets going. This felt fast to me. This felt like a faster vehicle. And the steering is not telling me much at all, which, again, all of this is totally fine. This is nitpicking when you're talking about a 5-passenger midsize SUV. It almost feels like the steering is going light. The longer I'm turning like this, it does have a very good dead spot in the center. You don't want too much dead spot because then it's got too much play, but you don't want no dead spot either. And tiny little corrections in the steering wheel make a big difference at the speed you're traveling. You want a little bit of a dead spot in the middle so that the wheel can move a little bit. And I think this thing has a good dead spot. So I think the weighting and the dead spot is good. I think the feedback and the boosting after you start turning it is a little just on par, I guess I would say. All right, easing into it, but then full throttle. Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God. Wow, off the rip, this thing is quick. All right, that's enough. This thing is quick off the rip. I'm glad I did a dig with this thing because that is a much quicker vehicle than you get when you're already at speed.
In this category, the gas RAV4 and Venza get the advantage, and let me explain why. The hybrids do a better job of being quiet and feeling quicker, but the Venza does a better job than the RAV4 hybrid in isolating its passengers from road imperfections, which is why it takes the advantage over the RAV4 hybrid. The gas RAV4 also gets the advantage though. Despite being noisier and slower, I prefer the 8-speed transmission shifting real gears, which is honestly a big part of the driving experience. The brake pedal in the gas RAV4 is not only better than the hybrids in inspiring confidence, but it also is one of the best in the segment. Finally, the gas engine is always running in the gas RAV4. In the hybrids, when the car is in motion, you can't really tell when the gas engine fires up beyond a faint noise. When stopped, however, both hybrids had a small yet noticeable shake when the engine fired up, and it seemed much more intrusive than when you're moving. That too keeps the gas RAV4 in the ranks in this category. The new Venza looks extremely upscale. In this category, I do a light design analysis of the vehicles from my point of view. Of course, this category is completely subjective, so feel free to substitute in your own opinions as I go through what I think looks good and what could use work. I know I keep saying that Toyota makes vehicles that increasingly are encroaching on Lexus territory, but seriously, it would be tough for someone to tell me that you couldn't slap a Lexus badge on the Venza and have anyone call it into question. The front has a huge, low-mounted grille that looks like an angry mouth. The headlights are smooth and thin, and the dual LED daytime running lights split the headlights up in perfect proportions. Because they are thin, and because the outer edges of the bumper are aggressive with their slit, it makes the Venza look the real deal. Real aggression, real sporting pretension. The only thing I don't love about the front is where the hood cut line is. It leaves a little portion of the body color sheet metal between the headlights, and it looks a little awkward, but isn't nearly enough to diminish the merits of the rest of the front. In profile, the Venza combines Lexus RX and a very obvious inspiration from the Jaguar F-Pace and Rolls-Royce Cullinan with the way the rear of the vehicle incorporates the thin taillights into the side of the car and makes the taillight area nearly the most protruding part of the rear. The rear window is severely raked inward, and the roofline peaks over the B-pillar and starts floating down toward the roof-mounted spoiler. In profile, the front looks very similar to the current RX, with the exact same cut line and similar headlights. The only difference here is that the nose of the Venza is more upturned than the RX. Otherwise, you could almost mistake a Venza for an RX from this angle. From the rear, the Venza departs a little bit from the F-Pace with a connected tail lamp bar and a very sculpted liftgate. It also has a lengthy stoplight bar up in the spoiler, reminiscent of recent Audi models. Also, Toyota ditched the floating roofline on this vehicle, refraining from the industry addiction of blacking out a portion of the C-pillar. Thank God, because the entire exterior looks amazing. Since 2019, I have thought that the RAV4 has been much better looking than in years past. It finally feels more mature than the last generation, while not being a wallflower like the generation 2 prior. It has a snubby, upright nose that reminds me of the Ram pickup truck line in the way it's shaped, but the headlights and all other design cues are all part of Toyota's new design language that moves away from the polarizing style of the last generation RAV4 and Corolla. The front chain is pulled up slightly and the headlights are angled downward as they reach toward the low-mounted grille to give it an attack-style stance, something they tried to do with the last model but didn't succeed at. The whole vehicle seems bigger and more expensive than it really is. The wheels on the gas XLE Premium are more appealing than the hybrid, but beyond the minor visual differences in the headlights and the blue badging, there isn't much that distinguishes the two visually. The side profile view is potentially a little bit busy with lots of lines going in different directions at the bottom and tops of the doors, a redundant cut in the C-pillar, and squared off wheel wells. I think it could use to get rid of a couple, but I'm not sure which should be on the chopping block first. The roofline stays relatively consistent, but the rear window does slant in toward the cabin pretty heavily. Interestingly, here you can see that the taillight area is the most pointed part of the vehicle, protruding nearly as far as the rear bumper face. Also evident is the tiny bar of separation in the C-pillar between the lower body and the roof of the car to create that floating roofline look that is all the rage. I wish Toyota had done without that in this application. From the rear view, the high-mounted taillights and that protrusion in their vicinity that we just talked about makes the vehicle seem taller. Overall, from exhaust tip to roof-mounted spoiler, it seems both low to the ground and tall simultaneously. I think I'd rather see the exhaust outlets integrated somewhere into the bumper. That may be too expensive for this model, but if that's the case, then there needs to be some slimming down somewhere else. The tall effect does make it seem like a proper SUV though, which is impressive. I am less confident in the bumper eating into the tailgate sheet metal, but I bet without this cut, the tailgate would seem like a vast expanse of metal that needs some detail. So I think their current solution is better than the alternative. The inside of the Venza keeps up with the promises the exterior makes. The steering wheel is good, not too big and not too small, but it's offset to the right of the seating position a little, which is annoying to some people. The transmission tunnel is very simple, with just cup holders to disturb its surface. Unlike other trans tunnels, this one slopes down at the outside edge like a pair of shoulders. Normally they have a hard line that sort of encompasses that surface. Interesting, but good looking. The only thing present that I really can't stand though is the pieces rising from the side of the trans tunnel. The one on the left is thinner than the right one. I have no idea why Toyota did this. It does not seem to be a very functional choice. If it doesn't bother you, there isn't much else to nitpick. On the limited model with the 12.3-inch screen, the interior really comes together and starts to look like a full-blown luxury vehicle. The XLE I filmed with had the optional bigger screen, but it comes standard with the 8-incher, which is still a good centerpiece. The passenger's side is dominated by one central line incorporating their vent that disappears behind the screen. This is probably top 2 current Toyota interiors. I think the RAV4's interior is also probably one of the best Toyota has put out recently. It avoids the layering of the current Highlander that I'm not a fan of, and it also avoids the abnormal climate infotainment gloss black trapezoid in the current Camry. The shifter is sporty looking, the transmission tunnel is an appropriate width, and the climate controls are easily accessed and organized perfectly. The screen sticks quite far out of the dash, which is a little odd, but the perfect climate control orientation sort of makes up for that fact. The center of the steering wheel is middle of the road, but the spokes are good. The rest of the dashboard has just one layer on the passenger side with a vent incorporated, much cleaner than the other Toyotas. Overall, this is a very pleasant place to be. Despite the RAV4's styling being my favorite of this model line ever, and the fact that I prefer its interior to the Venza's, I still have to give the advantage to the Venza because its exterior takes things to a new level. This is what I was talking about when I said some of the Venza's MSRP is baked into its sex appeal. It may not be able to haul as much cargo, but the exterior of the thing oozes luxury. This is the one the valet will park out front, so for that reason, the Venza gets the advantage. At the end of the day, there isn't a right or a wrong choice between these three, though I would argue for everyone to do the math on price premium versus fuel savings if you've narrowed it down to the 2 RAV4s, because in theory there is a right answer for everyone between those two. Were it my money, I would buy the RAV4 Hybrid. I feel like it offers the best of both worlds in a way. However, that's because my current lifestyle demands fuel efficiency and superior functionality. If I had more disposable income, or I was an empty nester or a bachelor with cash to burn, the Venza would be right up my alley. They're built for different people, and I hope by now you realize which one is right for you. Either way, Toyota has you covered on the SUV and hybrid front with these 3 SUVs. That's it. If you enjoyed the comparison, please feel free to leave a like. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.